Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and today we're going to be chatting about treat meals, or cheat meals as most folks call them, and whether they can help you lose fat faster or not. Now, what is a treat meal? A treat meal is a meal where you supposedly go off your regular scheduled programming nutrition-wise and eat whatever you want. So folks often go for things like pizza, burgers, pasta, or whatever they feel like. Essentially, a treat meal is a higher calorie meal made up of things that you wouldn't necessarily want to eat on a daily basis when fat loss is your goal. Back in the day, the idea around treat meals was that they helped to boost the metabolism and quote unquote trick your body into thinking that it wasn't in a calorie deficit and therefore it wouldn't go into starvation mode or ramp down the metabolism. So the belief was that it would actually help you lose fat faster. While this sort of made sense intuitively to a degree, it turned out not to be true. The body doesn't operate on such a small timescale, meaning one meal isn't even close to enough to impact metabolism essentially at all. So treat meals don't help you lose fat faster from a physical standpoint. However, they might help you lose fat faster from a psychological angle. So for example, if the idea of sticking to your diet for 7 days a week with no mental release or break is super daunting, but adding a treat meal in once per week makes the diet feel a lot more doable and realistic, then having a treat meal could actually help you lose fat faster. Not because that one meal is doing anything special from a metabolic standpoint, but because it's helping you adhere or follow your diet the rest of the week much closer, and therefore you're going to get better results long term. But let's dig into a real world example to see how this actually plays out. Let's say that you've established that your daily calorie intake to lose roughly 2 pounds per week is 1,500 calories per day. So 1,500 calories per day times 7 days per week equates to 10,500 calories over the course of the week. Now, in this first example, let's say that you're not implementing a treat meal, but you're finding it really hard to adhere to that 1,500 calories every single day, especially on the weekends, because it just feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. So 3 times per week, you're finding yourself blowing your calorie budget by, say, 750 calories. So your 10,500 weekly intake is actually turning out to be closer to 12,750. Now, in this second example, you're implementing a treat meal once per week on the weekend, and you find that having that planned meal makes it much easier for you to stay on track throughout the week from a psychological standpoint. Your treat meal, let's say, is 1,000 calories on top of your regular intake, which lands you at roughly 11,500 total calories for the week. Well, that's 1,250 calories lower than the setup where you didn't implement a treat meal. So in this case, it would appear that implementing the treat meal actually had you lose fat faster. But now we know that it wasn't due to the 1,000 calorie spike doing anything special in regards to your metabolism. It was that knowing that you had that mental break, had you adhere to your nutrition program more closely, that lowered your overall intake for the week, and therefore you get faster results. It's identical to your budget. However you spin it, the setup that has you spend less money throughout the course of the week in total is going to result in more savings come 7 days' time. So as you can see, overall adherence to your program is the key. But how you set up that program is really important because you want to structure it in a way that makes it as easy as possible for you to follow it. Now, it's worth mentioning, instead of having that 1,000 calorie treat meal, you could totally distribute that 1,000 calories over the course of the week evenly and get the exact same result. So your 1,500 daily calorie total could actually be 1,642 because 1,000 divided by 7 equals 142. Plus 1,500 is 1,642 calories. This would yield the exact same result as ingesting 1,500 calories per day with a 1,000 calorie treat meal on top because you still end up with the same intake at the end of the week. Purely to illustrate this point, hypothetically, you could also fast for 6 days and then consume your entire week's worth of calories in 1 day and get the same fat loss result as well. Because what it ultimately comes down to is action over time. Practically speaking, no one is going to do that, but you get the underlying principle. This brings up a really common mistake that I see all the time. It's folks focusing so much on a single day versus weeks and months. So for example, someone thinks to themselves, I want to lose fat fast, and so I'm going to eat 800 calories per day. And they do that Monday through Thursday, and then Friday rolls around and they're feeling so hungry and so restricted that their weekend turns into a 10,000 calorie absolute shit show, and they erase their entire calorie deficit for the week. This is a classic example of not taking a big picture approach, because consuming 800 calories per day for 99% of the population is just not going to be sustainable. And therefore, maybe eating almost double that, so 1,500 calories per day, with a treat meal in the mix actually has them achieve faster results overall because they're keeping the big picture adherence in mind. I include a weekly treat meal in the vast majority of my nutritional coaching clients' programs because I've found it to be more effective for most folks from an adherence standpoint. Some of my clients skip it, or we implement a bit of a different approach, like smaller, more frequent treats, but we're still sure to keep the overall calorie intake or area under the curve in mind because that's what's most important. So do treat meals have you lose fat faster? Maybe, depending on your psychology. If a treat meal makes it easier for you to adhere to your program or plan more effectively and therefore lowers your overall calorie intake over the course of weeks and months, then yes, it does. It will result in faster fat loss, but again, it's because it lowers total intake, not because there's anything inherently special about a treat meal or a sudden calorie increase itself. So just ask yourself, what approach do I need to take in order to make this a sustainable change that I can maintain over the course of time? Now, it's worth mentioning that there are some folks that when they have a treat meal, they tend to go off the deep end and it turns into them just craving more and more funky food. So if that's you, you might want to just forego the indulgence altogether. And fortunately, this person is going to be able to eat a little bit more on a daily basis just because they don't need to factor in that calorie spike via 1,000 calorie treat meal that I just mentioned. Also, if you find yourself fixating on that treat meal throughout the entire week, where you're literally thinking, brooding, and planning around it extensively, and it becomes a hyper-focus sort of thing, it's probably not for you either. Now, if you do decide to implement this treat meal strategy, I definitely recommend having it as your last meal of the day, because if you have it early for, say, breakfast or lunch, it's really hard to go back to quote unquote regular eating after that, because nothing tastes the same after you crush a pizza. I mean, if you have a pizza for lunch on a Sunday for your treat meal, good luck returning to single ingredient whole foods for dinner after that. It is really tough to do. So be sure to have your treat meal at dinner so that your treat meal doesn't turn into a treat day. Lastly, if you're still keen on getting results, this cannot be a free-for-all meal. You absolutely can ingest enough calories in a single meal to throw off your entire week if you indulge enough. So just keep in mind that just because you technically call it one meal doesn't mean that the calories can't accumulate to a degree where your progress is essentially a wash for the week. I say this from personal experience because when I was in my early 20s, I went hard during the week. I created a huge calorie deficit, and then I just went mental for my treat meal because I thought for some reason that I could game the system with this strategy and have my cake and eat it too. It doesn't work. You can think about it like your budget. If you do an awesome job of saving money all week and you've accumulated $500 in savings over the course of 7 days, if you go on a shopping binge, you can spend that $500 no problem and be no better for it come Monday morning. So zoom out a little bit, keep the big picture in mind, and implement something that has it as easy as possible for you to adhere to your nutritional program, because this stuff is hard enough as it is. You don't want to make it any harder. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can head on over to n1fitness.com or click the link in the description below. Follow me up on Instagram at n1fitness, and feel free to friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. And lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.